Everyone panicked when the rare dialect emerged, until the soft-spoken waitress decoded every detail. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The evening was just beginning to settle into its usual rhythm at Le Point Rouge, the upscale restaurant nestled in the heart of Manhattan. The clink of silverware on fine china echoed softly in the elegant dining room, mingling with the low murmur of wealthy patrons discussing business deals and social affairs. Among them, Maria, a waitress known for her calm demeanor, moved effortlessly between tables, her quiet presence almost invisible to the bustling crowd. Dressed in the standard black and white uniform, she exuded a quiet grace that belied the storm of thoughts running through her mind. Maria had always been a woman of few words, but tonight, fate had something unexpected in store. At table 7, a powerful CEO named Richard Lawson, whose name carried weight in corporate circles, sat with his colleagues. They were discussing a potential multi-million-dollar deal, their voices tinged with confidence and authority. Yet, as the conversation progressed, something unusual happened. Richard, who was known for his ability to dominate any room he entered, switched to a language that no one in the restaurant seemed to understand. His words flowed fluently, but the dialect was unfamiliar, almost foreign. It wasn't French or Spanish, nor was it any of the common European languages the restaurant staff was used to hearing. It was something rare, something ancient. The room fell into a brief moment of silence, as puzzled glances were exchanged between his tablemates and the surrounding diners. The servers moved swiftly, trying to pretend nothing was amiss, but the confusion in the air was palpable. Maria, however, paused as she walked past table 7. The foreign dialect caught her ear, and for a split second, she felt something stir within her. She had heard that dialect before, or rather, she had been taught it during her childhood. Her grandmother had spoken it, an obscure regional language that had been passed down through generations. Maria, having grown up in a diverse neighborhood, had learned many languages, but this rare dialect, had always intrigued her. As the CEO continued speaking, his tone growing more animated, Maria couldn't help but lean in slightly, her curiosity piqued. She had to know. Without hesitation, she approached his table. Richard glanced up, surprised to see Maria standing before him. "Excuse me, sir," she said in a soft voice, trying to mask her excitement. "But you've made a mistake in the translation." Richard looked at her, clearly startled. "I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that," he replied, his tone skeptical. The other men at the table also turned their attention to her, raising an eyebrow at the unexpected interruption. "You're saying something completely different from what you think you're saying," Maria continued, her voice steady but firm. She wasn't sure why she felt compelled to speak up, but something told her it was important. "The phrase you just used, it's not what you think." Richard blinked in confusion, then glanced at his colleagues. "Are you sure about this?" His voice carried an edge of disbelief. But Maria, undeterred, nodded confidently. She turned to the others at the table. "I speak the dialect," she explained softly. "It's an old language from my family's heritage." The room grew still, and the once overlooked waitress suddenly commanded the attention of everyone around her. The CEO, still skeptical, tilted his head slightly. "You understand this?" he asked, his tone softening. "What exactly are you saying?" Maria nodded again, a small smile playing at the corner of her lips. "Yes, I understand it. The phrase you just used was not a business term. It's an old proverb. It means, the truth is hidden in plain sight, but only those who are willing to see it will understand." Richard and his colleagues exchanged surprised glances. They had all thought the words spoken were part of some high-level business negotiation, but now they realized they had misunderstood. The rare dialect that Maria had recognized held a deeper meaning, one that was far more profound than a mere business transaction. Maria's eyes glinted with quiet pride. As the rest of the room fell into a stunned silence, she turned to leave, but not before Richard's voice stopped her. "Wait," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What else can you tell me?" Maria paused, glancing back at him. I can tell you that understanding this language isn't just about words. It's about seeing the truth behind them. And right now, you're missing something important." With that, she turned and walked away, her words lingering in the air. The rest of the evening passed in a blur, but Richard's mind raced. The waitress, the quiet woman he had barely noticed before, had just changed everything. She had cracked open a truth he hadn't even realized he was blind to. Little did he know, this encounter would set in motion a series of events that would forever alter the course of his life and career. The following days after that fateful evening at Le Point Rouge, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental had happened. It was as if the rare dialect she had decoded for Richard Lawson was more than just a simple translation of words. It was a sign. The moment had shifted something inside her, a stir in her chest that she couldn't quite name. For years, Maria had moved through the world quietly, hiding behind the service industry, the very thing that kept her anonymous. But Richard, the powerful CEO, had seen something in her that no one else had, something that had been buried deep within her all along. Days passed, and Maria tried to return to her routine. She carried the weight of her knowledge and skills with her, but it was harder now to ignore the curiosity gnawing at her. She was just a waitress, wasn't she? Just a woman working to make ends meet, nothing more. But she knew there was more to her, something she had hidden away for far too long. Meanwhile, Richard couldn't stop thinking about Maria. After the shock of realizing that she could understand a dialect so rare, a language his top business associates could not, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had encountered someone extraordinary. He had seen her move through the restaurant with grace and calm, but that moment, when she translated the proverb, was unforgettable. He needed to know more. It wasn't just her knowledge of languages, it was the way she carried herself, the depth behind her quiet demeanor. She wasn't like the others he had met in his high-powered world. He had dismissed her at first, but now, he couldn't get her out of his mind. Richard decided to act. He couldn't just let her slip away into the background like so many others. He needed her to help him. The next day, Richard took action. His private jet was waiting at the airport as he called his team to arrange a meeting with Maria. He had already decided. He was going to offer her more than just a job offer. He was going to make her an offer she couldn't refuse. But Maria had her reservations. She wasn't sure if this was the kind of world she wanted to enter. She didn't want to be another cog in the machine, another person used for someone else's gain. She had seen it all before. The ambition, the deals, the constant hunger for more power and money. She wasn't like that. Her life had been simple, quiet, and she liked it that way. But when Richard called her, a part of her couldn't resist. She had never been offered something like this before. The next day, Maria entered Richard's office, located at the top floor of his towering skyscraper in downtown Manhattan. The glass windows offered a breathtaking view of the city, a view that seemed so foreign to her, so distant from her life of humble beginnings. She took a seat in front of Richard's massive desk, trying to remain composed. Richard, however, didn't waste time. "Maria," he said, leaning forward, his voice calm, yet serious. "I've been thinking about our conversation the other night. What you did for me, what you said, was more than impressive. It was vital. You saved me from making a huge mistake." Maria stayed silent, her gaze focused on the view outside the window, unsure of how to respond. "I want you to come work with me," Richard continued. "I need someone who can see beyond the surface, someone who can decipher what others overlook. You understand things in a way most people don't, Maria. Your knowledge, your ability to decode, it's invaluable." Maria remained quiet. She had never imagined herself in a position like this. She had spent so many years in the background, in the shadows, that the idea of stepping into the spotlight was intimidating. "I know you're unsure," Richard said, as if reading her mind. "But think about it. You could do more than just serve people. You could shape decisions, influence outcomes. You have the potential to change everything." Maria stood up, her hands trembling slightly. "I don't know if I'm the right person for this," she said softly. "I've spent my life trying to stay out of the spotlight." Richard smiled, a knowing look in his eyes. "That's exactly why I want you. You're not like the others. You have a clear vision, and you're not blinded by the noise of this world." Maria hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "What would I be doing?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. Richard leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "I need someone to help me with negotiations, someone who can read people the way you do. I want you to help me with the upcoming deal with our partners in Europe. I believe your unique perspective will give us the edge we need." Maria felt a lump form in her throat. She had spent so many years hiding who she really was. But now, here she was, being asked to use her skills for something far greater than she ever imagined. But at what cost? "What makes you think I'm ready for something like this?" she asked. "You're ready because you see things others can't," Richard replied. "You have the ability to decipher meaning from what's unsaid, and that's a rare gift. Trust me, Maria. You can make a real difference." Maria looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never been one to take risks, to leap into the unknown. But something about Richard's words, the sincerity in his eyes, made her consider it. Maybe, just maybe, this was her chance to finally step into the world she had always kept at arm's length. "I'll need some time to think about it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Richard nodded, standing up and walking around his desk. "Take all the time you need, Maria. But know this, I'll be waiting for your answer." It had been 3 days since Richard's offer, and Maria couldn't escape the feeling that she was standing at a crossroads, one she had never expected to face. Every time she tried to focus on her work at Le Point Rouge, her thoughts drifted back to the conversation in Richard's office. Could she really walk away from the life she knew, the quiet existence she had built for herself, and enter the world of power, money, and corporate negotiations? The decision felt monumental, and the weight of it sat heavily on her chest. She had always been content with her simple life, helping others in a quiet, unassuming way. She never craved recognition or a life in the spotlight. But Richard's words echoed in her mind. "You're ready because you see things others can't." Was this the opportunity she had been waiting for? The moment where she could finally put her abilities to use in a way that could truly change the world around her? The phone call came the next morning, earlier than usual. Maria picked it up, her heart racing as she saw Richard's name on the screen. "Maria, I'm glad you called back." Richard's voice was smooth, calm, and businesslike, but she could hear the faint edge of anticipation. "Have you thought about my offer?" Maria paused, taking a deep breath. She had spent hours, days even, contemplating the decision. She had weighed every option, every possible outcome, and yet, something kept pulling her back to Richard's offer. It wasn't just the financial promise. It was the chance to finally break free from her old life. "I've thought about it a lot," Maria said, her voice steady but hesitant. "And I've made my decision." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Richard's voice softened. "And I'm in," Maria replied, the words feeling both terrifying and exhilarating as they left her mouth. She had made the leap. "I'll join you. But I need to be clear about something. I'm not here just for the job. I want to make a real difference. I don't want to be part of the machine, Richard. I want to be someone who changes things." Richard's response was immediate, his tone appreciative. "I knew you were different, Maria. You've got vision, and I'm not going to stand in your way. We'll do things your way." As the conversation ended, Maria set the phone down, a sense of relief washing over her. She had made her decision, and there was no turning back now. The following week, she walked into Anderson Capital's sleek, glass and steel headquarters. The building towered over the city like a monument to ambition. Maria had seen it from the outside many times, but now, walking through the doors as an employee felt surreal. The lobby was pristine, with polished marble floors and walls lined with abstract art. She felt out of place in her modest outfit, but Richard had assured her that it was her mind, not her clothes, that mattered. He had told her to leave the apron behind, and today, that's exactly what she did. She was no longer just the quiet waitress at Le Point Rouge. She was someone with a voice, with a purpose, and she was ready to make her mark. Richard met her in the lobby, a welcoming smile on his face as he extended his hand. "Welcome aboard, Maria," he said, his voice warm, though there was a glimmer of businesslike precision in his eyes. "Let's get started." The day flew by in a blur of introductions, meetings, and documents she could hardly keep up with. Richard had arranged for Maria to be involved in the next big deal, one that involved global investments in emerging markets. As they sat in his office that afternoon, reviewing a series of confidential reports, Maria couldn't help but feel both overwhelmed and excited. She had always dreamed of making an impact, but now, she was in the driver's seat. "You're doing great, Maria," Richard said as he glanced over at her, a hint of pride in his voice. I knew you had it in you. Maria smiled, though inside, she was still grappling with the enormity of her decision. This wasn't the life she had imagined for herself. It was a world full of high stakes and even higher expectations. But somehow, she felt more alive than she ever had before. That evening, after a long day, Maria returned to her small apartment in Brooklyn. She had been given a corporate card, access to a private office, and a salary that was more than she had ever dreamed of. Yet, despite all the luxury that was now within her grasp, something tugged at her heart. The apartment felt empty without the hum of the busy restaurant, without the familiar faces of the customers she had once served. As she sat on the edge of her bed, Maria realized that this was just the beginning. There was so much more to learn, so many new challenges to face. She had walked away from the only life she had ever known, and now, she had to prove that she could make it in this new world. But even as doubts crept into her mind, Maria felt a sense of purpose that she had never experienced before. This was her chance to use her unique talents for something greater than herself. The next morning, she walked into Anderson Capital with a renewed sense of determination. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a key player in a global enterprise, and she was ready to see how far her skills could take her. The next few weeks were a whirlwind for Maria. The office at Anderson Capital was a far cry from the quiet restaurant she had worked in just a month ago. The polished floors, sleek desks, and sharp suits of her new colleagues were a constant reminder of how much her life had changed. At first, Maria felt like an outsider, someone who had wandered into a world she didn't quite belong in. But as the days passed, she started to find her rhythm. Richard had been true to his word. He didn't treat her like just another employee. He valued her perspective, especially when it came to understanding the subtleties of international business. He often sought her input on negotiations and corporate strategies, tasks that would have been out of reach for someone in her previous position. Maria's unique skills had become her greatest asset. Her ability to read people, to listen to what was unsaid, gave her a sharp edge in the world of high-stakes business. It was a skill she had honed in the restaurant, when reading customers and their needs was part of her job. But here, it had far more significance. She found herself advising Richard on everything from market trends to personal dynamics within the company. But while Maria's career at Anderson Capital seemed to be soaring, a part of her heart longed for the simplicity of her old life. The quiet moments in the back of the restaurant, the friendly banter with regular customers, the warmth of being part of a community, it was all gone now. She missed the familiarity, the small but meaningful connections she had with the people she served. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of meetings, Maria walked back to her apartment, her mind heavy with thoughts. She had just been part of a conference call with potential investors in Europe, discussing a multi-million-dollar deal. She had offered a suggestion that had, surprisingly, been accepted. Richard had praised her, telling her she was proving herself to be a valuable member of the team. But despite the praise, Maria felt unsettled. The world of high finance and corporate power was starting to feel more like a machine than a place where she could truly make a difference. As she entered her apartment, she threw her keys onto the kitchen counter and sank into the chair by the window. The city lights outside twinkled in the distance, and for a moment, she just stared out, lost in thought. It was then that her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Richard had sent her a message. "Maria, I know it's been a lot lately, but I need to talk to you about something important. Meet me at the office tomorrow at noon. I'll be waiting." The message was vague, and Maria couldn't help but feel a twinge of anxiety. What could be so urgent? The next day, Maria arrived at the office early, as she always did. Richard's office was unusually quiet when she walked in. He was standing by the window, looking out at the city, as if waiting for something or someone. "Maria," he said as she entered, turning to face her. "I need to be honest with you about something. I've been offered an opportunity to expand the company's operations into emerging markets in Asia, and I need someone I can trust to lead the initiative. I want you to head this project." Maria's heart skipped a beat. Leading a global project was a huge responsibility. She had never imagined herself in such a role. The thought of leaving her comfort zone, of stepping into something so foreign and challenging, terrified her. But Richard's gaze was unwavering, filled with a sense of confidence that made Maria hesitate. She had worked hard to prove herself, and now here was an opportunity that could change everything. "I know this is a big ask," Richard continued, his voice calm but insistent. But I believe you're the right person for this. You have the skills and the instincts. You can do this. Maria stood there, unsure of how to respond. The pressure of the decision was overwhelming. She had been waiting for an opportunity like this, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure if she was ready. What's the catch? She asked, her voice low. Richard smiled. No catch. I just need someone who can think outside the box, someone who can navigate the complexities of international markets. And I trust you. Maria took a deep breath, the weight of the decision hanging heavily on her shoulders. She had worked her whole life to get to this point, to prove that she was more than just a waitress, more than just someone who served people's meals. This was her moment to step into a world where she could have real influence. But at the same time, she knew it wouldn't be easy. The path ahead would be filled with challenges, and she would need to give everything she had to make it work. After a long silence, Maria nodded. I'll do it, she said, her voice steady. Richard's eyes lit up with approval. I knew you would. This is the beginning of something big, Maria. I'm counting on you. As she left Richard's office that day, Maria felt a mix of excitement and fear. She was about to embark on a journey that would take her to places she had never imagined. It was a chance to prove not just to the world, but to herself, that she was more than what her past had defined her as. And while the path ahead was uncertain, Maria knew one thing for sure. This was her moment to shine. The next few months flew by in a blur of international meetings, strategy sessions, and high-stakes negotiations. Maria found herself on planes more than she was in her apartment, traveling from one country to another, learning about new cultures, markets, and the intricacies of global business. What had once felt foreign and intimidating was beginning to feel like home. Her instincts, honed in the quiet corners of the restaurant, were proving invaluable in boardrooms and high-powered discussions. As the head of the Asia expansion project, Maria was not only a participant in the company's future, she was driving it. But even as her professional life soared, a part of her still felt disconnected. The pressure was immense, and every decision she made carried the weight of millions of dollars. Richard had given her the freedom to lead, but with that freedom came expectations that sometimes felt impossible to meet. One evening, after a particularly grueling conference call with potential investors in Asia, Maria found herself alone in her office, staring at the city lights outside the window. She was exhausted, mentally and physically. Her team had presented a proposal that would expand Anderson Capital's influence in Southeast Asia, but the investors had been hesitant, questioning the viability of the project. They had doubts about the political climate, the infrastructure, and whether the company could truly navigate the challenges of emerging markets. Maria had done everything she could to ease their concerns, but she knew that convincing them was going to take more than just facts and figures. It was going to take trust in the vision she had for the company's future. But trust, she knew, was something that had to be earned. Maria stood up and walked over to the window, her reflection mirrored in the glass as she looked out over the sprawling city below. It felt like a lifetime ago that she had been standing in a small restaurant, blending into the background, just another face in the crowd. Now, she was a key player in one of the most influential companies in the world. The contrast was overwhelming. She had come so far, but she still felt like she was on the outside looking in. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. She turned to see Richard standing in the doorway, his usual confident expression softened by what seemed like genuine concern. Maria, he said, stepping into the room. I thought I'd find you here. You've been burning the candle at both ends. Maria gave him a tired smile. I'm fine, she said, though she knew it wasn't entirely true. Just trying to figure out how to make this work. Richard leaned against the desk, studying her with his sharp eyes. I've been watching you, Maria, he said quietly. You're doing more than just managing this project. You're leading it. And that's what's going to make the difference. Maria shook her head, a mix of frustration and doubt crossing her features. But they don't trust me, Richard. The investors, they're not buying into the vision. They don't believe we can succeed in these markets. Richard's gaze softened. They'll come around. They always do. But you have to remember something. You're not doing this alone. You have a team behind you. And you have me. Maria looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. You're not just another person I'm working for, Maria, he continued. You've become someone I trust. And that's not something I give lightly. You've earned that. His words hit her harder than she expected. Trust. It was a word that had always felt distant to her, something she had given to others without hesitation but never fully received in return. And here was Richard, offering her that trust without reservation. She had never imagined that she would be the one to lead something this big, this important. But now, standing in this moment, she realized that she had already proven herself, not just to the investors, not just to Richard, but to herself. She had earned her place at the table. "Thank you," she said softly, the weight of his words settling in. Richard smiled, his usual confidence returning. "Don't thank me yet. The real work begins now." The following weeks were a blur of intense preparations. Maria worked tirelessly with her team to refine their proposal, anticipating every question, every concern the investors might have. She used every bit of knowledge she had gained from her travels, her meetings, and the people she had met along the way. She had learned to trust her instincts, and now, more than ever, she had to believe in herself. As the day of the final presentation approached, Maria felt a familiar anxiety creeping in. The stakes were higher than ever. But this time, she didn't feel the need to shrink back. This time, she was ready. The presentation was set in a sleek, modern conference room, with the investors seated around a polished, oval table. Maria stood at the front, her laptop open, her notes prepared. She felt the eyes of the room on her, but this time, it didn't faze her. She was no longer the quiet waitress in the background. She was the one leading the conversation. With a steady voice, she began to present their proposal, outlining the steps Anderson Capital would take to succeed in the Asian market. She spoke confidently, answering questions with precision, anticipating concerns with ease. As the presentation came to a close, there was a long silence in the room. The investors exchanged glances, and Maria held her breath. Finally, one of the investors leaned forward. "You've convinced us," he said, a smile spreading across his face. "We're in." Maria's heart skipped a beat. She had done it. She had succeeded. As the room erupted in applause, Maria allowed herself a small smile. This was the moment she had been working toward. This was her victory, and it was just the beginning. Months passed, and the project Maria had worked so tirelessly on began to take shape. Anderson Capital's expansion into Southeast Asia was becoming a reality, and Maria was at the helm, leading her team through the complexities of international negotiations and business strategy. It was a challenging, often overwhelming task, but Maria had found a rhythm, one that allowed her to push through the moments of self-doubt and exhaustion. As the months rolled on, the results of her hard work were undeniable. The company was securing deals, attracting investors, and gaining a foothold in markets that were previously considered too risky. Maria had proven that she was more than just a waitress with a knack for languages. She was a force in the corporate world, a woman who could stand shoulder to shoulder with the top players in business. But with success came new pressures. Richard, always a man of high expectations, began to push her even harder. "Maria, you've done well so far," he said one afternoon, looking over a report of the latest developments in the Asia market. "But this is just the beginning. I need you to lead us into India next. The competition is fierce there, and we can't afford to fall behind." Maria nodded, though a part of her recoiled at the weight of the request. India was a different beast entirely, with its own set of challenges and cultural complexities. But she had come this far. She couldn't back down now. "I'll get started immediately," Maria said, her voice steady. Richard gave her a small smile, the kind that spoke volumes. "I knew I could count on you, Maria." As she left his office, Maria felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. She had been thrust into a position she had never dreamed of, yet now it felt almost natural to be making decisions that could affect entire countries. But as the demands on her time grew, she began to feel the cracks. Late nights spent working through time zones, early mornings filled with meetings, endless calls and presentations. It was starting to take its toll. She found herself running on autopilot, her mind constantly occupied by deadlines, projections, and strategies. And yet, despite the success, Maria could not shake the feeling that something was missing. She had given up so much of herself to get here. The simple joys of life, the quiet moments, the connection to people, had faded into the background. She missed the calm of the restaurant, the ease of her old life, and most of all, she missed feeling like herself. One night, As she sat alone in her office, her gaze drifting across the city skyline, her phone buzzed. It was a text from an old friend, someone she hadn't heard from in years. "Maria, how are you? I've been thinking about you lately. I hope you're doing well." The message, simple as it was, stirred something in her. She hadn't realized how much she longed for connection, for a reminder of the person she used to be. She quickly replied, "I'm doing well, but I've been really busy. Life's changed a lot lately." Her friend's response came quickly. "I can imagine. You've always been someone who goes after what she wants. But don't forget to take care of yourself." Maria stared at the screen, the words resonating deeply. She had been so consumed by her ambition, so focused on proving herself in the corporate world, that she had forgotten to live. She had forgotten to take care of herself. The realization hit her like a wave. For the first time in months, Maria allowed herself to stop, to breathe, and to truly reflect. She had come a long way from the quiet waitress at Le Point Rouge, but at what cost? The next day, Maria made a decision. She needed balance. She needed to reconnect with the parts of herself that she had left behind in the pursuit of success. As she prepared for the next big meeting with potential investors in India, Maria knew that she couldn't keep going at this pace. She needed to step back, even if just for a moment. She decided to take a weekend off, something she hadn't done in months. She reached out to Richard to let him know. "Richard, I need a break," she said, her voice firm yet honest. "I've been working nonstop, and I need to recharge." Richard was quiet for a moment before responding. "I understand, Maria. You've earned it. Take the time you need. But just know, we're counting on you." Maria felt a sense of relief wash over her. She had made the right choice. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to let go of the pressure, to step away from the demands that had consumed her life. That weekend, Maria took a trip to the countryside. She stayed in a small cottage by the lake, far from the noise and chaos of the city. The air was fresh, the pace slow, and for the first time in months, she felt truly at peace. As she walked along the shore, the stillness of the water reflecting the clear sky above, Maria allowed herself to feel everything she had been ignoring. The quiet joy of the moment, the beauty of nature, the connection to herself. It was a reminder that success, no matter how hard-earned, was not the only thing that mattered. As the weekend came to an end, Maria returned to the city with a renewed sense of purpose. She was ready to face the challenges ahead, but this time, she would do it on her own terms. She had proven herself in the corporate world, but now, it was time to prove to herself that she could balance ambition with the things that truly mattered. After her weekend retreat, Maria returned to Anderson Capital with a new sense of balance, but her next challenge was already looming. The India expansion project, which had once felt like a distant idea, was now right in front of her. She had a team waiting for her direction, a group of investors watching her closely, and Richard counting on her to succeed. The pressure was immense, but Maria had come to realize something important during her time away from the office. Success didn't mean sacrificing everything that mattered. The path ahead was still daunting, but she now understood that she had the power to shape it on her own terms. One morning, as she entered the sleek conference room for a meeting with the team, Richard was already there, waiting. He stood by the window, looking out at the city, his hands clasped behind his back. "Good morning, Maria," he greeted her, his tone calm, but filled with anticipation. "How are you feeling about India?" Maria took a deep breath, walking to the table where a stack of reports awaited her. "I'm ready," she replied, her voice steady. "We've put in the groundwork, and now it's time to execute." Richard gave her an approving nod, a rare moment of quiet. "Acknowledgement. That's what I like to hear. We're counting on you. Make it happen." As the team filed in and took their seats, Maria couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. She had earned her place here, and she knew she was the right person to lead the project. The meeting began with an overview of the current state of the India market, opportunities, challenges, and potential partners. The team was sharp, asking questions, analyzing data, and offering suggestions. Maria felt confident in the direction they were heading, but as the meeting progressed, a thought began to nag at the back of her mind. There was one factor that had yet to be addressed: the local culture. India was vast, diverse, and complex, and Maria knew that without a deep understanding of its people, their values, and their business practices, the expansion could falter. She stood up, signaling for the room to quiet. "I've been thinking," Maria began, her voice cutting through the noise of the room. We need more than just a solid business strategy. We need to understand the culture of the regions we're entering. If we want to succeed in India, we have to build relationships, not just deals. Richard looked at her, intrigued but skeptical. What do you mean? He asked. Maria felt the weight of the room's attention on her. She knew she was taking a risk by going off script, but it was a risk she was willing to take. I'm talking about the human element of business, she said. In many parts of India, relationships come before business. We can't just walk in and expect to close deals. We need to connect with the local partners, understand their needs, and show respect for their culture. She paused, letting her words sink in. I think we should bring in a cultural consultant, someone with deep knowledge of the local business practices and etiquette. It will give us an edge, especially when negotiating with potential partners. Richard looked thoughtful, clearly weighing her suggestion. You're right, he said after a moment. We've been focused on the numbers, the logistics, but the people side of things is just as important. Maria felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had spoken up, and it had paid off. The team agreed to hire a cultural consultant, and they began preparing for their first trip to India. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation, travel arrangements, and strategy meetings. Maria found herself diving deeper into the cultural nuances of India, learning about the importance of respect, trust, and patience in business dealings. She had always been a quick study, but this was something new. It wasn't just about business strategy, it was about understanding people. As the team boarded the flight to India, Maria felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This was it, the moment where all her hard work would be tested. The first few days in India were a blur of meetings, introductions, and cultural exchanges. They met with local business leaders, government officials, and potential partners, each interaction teaching Maria something new about the region. The cultural consultant they had hired was invaluable, guiding them through the delicate art of negotiation and helping them navigate the complexities of local customs. Maria's instincts, honed through years of observing people, were sharper than ever. She could see beyond the surface, reading the subtle cues that others missed. And slowly, the team began to build trust with their Indian counterparts. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, miscommunications, and moments of doubt. But with each hurdle, Maria grew more confident in her role. She wasn't just a leader. She was a bridge between two worlds, connecting cultures and businesses in a way that no one else could. As the deal finally came together, Maria stood in the conference room, watching as the contract was signed. The room was filled with smiles, handshakes, and congratulations. It was a moment of triumph, a testament to the hard work and dedication of the entire team. Richard clapped her on the back, his usual stern demeanor replaced with genuine appreciation. You did it, Maria, he said, his voice filled with respect. You made this happen. Maria smiled, but inside, she felt something even more powerful than pride, gratitude. She had proven herself not just to Richard, not just to the team, but to herself. She had taken a leap into the unknown, and it had paid off. But more importantly, she had discovered something about herself she had never known before. She was not just capable of leading a global expansion. She was capable of bridging cultures and connecting people on a deeper level. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, Maria felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Maria stood on the rooftop of the Anderson Capitol building, looking out at the sprawling city below. The past few months had been a blur of success, travel, and constant pressure. She had led the company's expansion into India, a project that many had doubted would succeed, and yet here she was, standing at the top of it all. The deal had been completed, the investors were pleased, and Richard had been nothing but impressed with her performance. But despite all the achievements, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. She had come so far from her days as a waitress in a small Manhattan restaurant. And yet, in this moment of triumph, she felt a disconnect. The success she had worked so hard for, the position she had earned, somehow didn't feel as fulfilling as she had imagined it would. She had risen through the ranks, proving herself time and again, but with each victory, the weight of the responsibilities grew heavier. Maria had gained everything she had once wanted: a high-paying job, the respect of her colleagues, and the admiration of Richard, but she had also lost something along the way. The quiet, simple life she had once cherished seemed like a distant memory. She missed the conversations with strangers, the moments of human connection that had once given her life meaning. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind her. She turned to see Richard approaching, his expression serious but kind. "Maria, are you all right?" he asked, his voice softening as he saw the look in her eyes. Maria forced a smile. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just thinking." Richard stepped closer, his gaze never leaving her face. "You've been carrying a lot on your shoulders lately. I can see it in your eyes." Maria sighed, looking back at the city. "It's just that. I've worked so hard for this, but now that I'm here, it feels like I've lost sight of what really matters." Richard was quiet for a moment, then placed a hand on her shoulder. "Maria, you've accomplished more than most people could ever dream of. You've proven yourself, not just to us, but to yourself. But success is a funny thing. It can make you feel like you've reached the top, but it doesn't always bring the satisfaction you expect." Maria looked at him, surprised by his insight. "I thought that once I achieved this level of success, I'd feel different. Like I would finally be fulfilled. But instead, I feel," she trailed off, unsure how to put it into words. "Empty," Richard offered. Maria nodded. "Yeah, like I've been chasing something, but now that I have it, it's not enough." Richard took a step back, considering her words. "You're not the only one who feels that way, Maria. Success can be isolating. It can make you lose sight of the things that truly matter, the connections you make, the people you help, and the joy in the simple moments." Maria felt a pang in her chest. She had spent so much time focusing on climbing the corporate ladder, on proving herself, that she had neglected the very things that had once brought her joy. The small acts of kindness, the quiet moments of connection with others, the feeling of being part of something bigger than herself. "What should I do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Richard smiled, the warmth in his expression offering her some comfort. "Take a step back. Give yourself permission to slow down. You don't have to keep pushing yourself to the limit. You've earned the right to enjoy what you've accomplished. But more importantly, take time to reconnect with what made you passionate in the first place." Maria looked at him, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she could breathe. "Thanks, Richard. I needed to hear that." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You're welcome. Remember, you're not just a business leader. You're a person, too. Don't forget that." Maria smiled, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. For the first time in months, she felt like she was in control, not just of her career, but of her life. The next few days were a turning point for Maria. She decided to take Richard's advice to heart. She began to step back, allowing herself to take more time for herself. She took long walks in the park, reconnected with old friends, and even went back to her favorite restaurant, the one she had worked at all those years ago. It was a small, unassuming place, but it felt like home. As she sat in a quiet corner, sipping her coffee and watching the world go by, Maria realized something important. Success wasn't about climbing to the top or achieving fame. It was about finding balance and meaning in the journey. It was about staying true to who she was, even as the world around her changed. Maria didn't need to be perfect or always on top. She didn't need to be everything to everyone. What mattered was that she was happy with herself, and that she could still find joy in the simple things. When she returned to Anderson Capital, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was still the leader of the India project, still making deals and driving the company forward. But now, she did it with a deeper understanding of what mattered. She wasn't just working to prove herself anymore. She was working to create something that would make a real difference in the world. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. The following weeks were a whirlwind for Maria as she balanced her role at Anderson Capital with her personal life, which had taken on a new meaning after her realization during the break. The pressures of running the India expansion and handling other global projects were still high, but she had found a way to manage her time better, incorporating moments for self-care, reconnecting with friends, and taking time to reflect. Yet, as much as she tried to balance it all, something unexpected came her way that tested everything she had worked so hard to build. One morning, as she sat in her office reviewing a new market report, Richard walked in with a serious look on his face. "Maria, we need to talk," he said, closing the door behind him. Maria looked up from the papers, a slight frown forming on her face. Richard's usual confident demeanor seemed subdued, and Maria's gut told her that something was about to change. "What's going on?" she asked, setting the report down. Richard sat down across from her, his gaze steady. I've just received some disturbing news about our operations in India, he began, his voice calm, but with an undertone of concern. There have been some unexpected complications, and I need you to go there immediately to assess the situation. Maria's heart skipped a beat. The India project had been one of her most significant successes, and now something was threatening to undo all of their progress. What kind of complications? She asked, her voice tense. Richard leaned forward. There's a political shift happening in the region, and some local partners are starting to back out of their commitments. It's putting everything at risk. Our investors, our timeline, everything. I need you to go and smooth things over. Maria's mind raced. She had worked so hard to build trust with the local partners, and now it seemed like everything was crumbling before her eyes. But she couldn't afford to panic. She had faced challenges before, and she was more than capable of handling this one. I'll leave immediately, she said, standing up from her desk. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. Richard gave her a firm nod. I know you will. You've done it before. And remember, you've earned their trust. Don't let this setback derail everything we've worked for. As Maria made her way to the airport, her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. This was a new challenge, but one that she had the skills to tackle. She had learned the importance of relationships in business, and now, more than ever, she had to use that knowledge to turn the situation around. The flight to India was long, but it gave Maria plenty of time to think. She reviewed all the meetings and deals she had facilitated, the connections she had made, and the trust she had earned from the local partners. She couldn't let that slip away. When she arrived in New Delhi, Maria was met by a local liaison who briefed her on the situation. The political shift in India had created a climate of uncertainty, with new regulations and policies that made foreign investment less attractive. Several of their key partners had started to back out, citing concerns over the changing environment. The task ahead of her was clear. She needed to reassure the partners, show them the value of continuing the partnership, and find a way to stabilize the situation before it escalated further. Maria spent the next several days meeting with government officials, local businesses, and investors, trying to understand the root of the problem. She listened carefully, taking note of their concerns, and worked tirelessly to address them. There were moments when it seemed like the deal might fall through, but Maria's persistence paid off. Slowly, the partners began to trust her again. Her knowledge of the local culture and her understanding of their concerns allowed her to navigate the complex negotiations with ease. One evening, after a particularly tense meeting, Maria found herself sitting alone in her hotel room, reflecting on the progress she had made. It hadn't been easy, but she had managed to reassure the key partners, and the deal was starting to look promising again. She had done it. As she sat there, Maria felt a sense of satisfaction wash over her. She had faced this challenge head-on, and she had succeeded. But there was something else she realized in that moment, something that had been missing for a long time. It wasn't just about the business success, the deals, or the recognition. It was about the relationships she had built, the trust she had earned, and the impact she had made on the people she worked with. In that moment, Maria understood that success wasn't just about numbers or profit. It was about the people. And in that realization, she found a deeper sense of fulfillment than she had ever known. The following day, as she finalized the last details of the agreement, Maria received a call from Richard. I just wanted to check in and see how things were going, he said. Maria smiled, her voice filled with quiet confidence. It's all under control. We're back on track. Richard's relief was palpable. I knew you could do it, Maria. You've earned their trust, and now it's solidified. I couldn't be more proud of you. Maria's heart swelled with pride, but it wasn't just about the praise. It was about knowing that she had earned her place in this world, not just because of her achievements, but because of the way she had navigated the challenges and built meaningful connections along the way. As the deal was finalized and the project moved forward, Maria knew that she had found her true calling, not just as a business leader, but as someone who could connect people, bridge cultures, and create lasting change. She wasn't just a part of Anderson Capital's success. She was an integral part of its future. As the weeks went by, Maria continued to adjust to her dual role, leading major projects at Anderson Capital while staying connected to the values she had rediscovered during her time in India. It was clear that she was thriving in her professional life, but she couldn't help but feel the tug of something deeper, Something more personal. The long hours, the constant travel, the never-ending meetings, they all took their toll. But she had learned the importance of balance. She was no longer sacrificing everything for her career. For the first time in a long time, Maria had begun to carve out space for herself, for the things that truly mattered outside of work. One afternoon, as Maria was preparing for a strategy meeting with potential investors, she received an unexpected call from her former colleague and close friend, Emma. Maria's face broke into a smile as she answered the phone. "Hey, Emma. It's been too long." Emma's voice was warm and familiar. "I know, right? I've been meaning to catch up with you. How are things going at Anderson Capital?" Maria leaned back in her chair, thinking for a moment. "It's been a wild ride. We're growing, expanding, and it feels like I'm constantly on the go. But I'm starting to find a better balance. I'm making time for myself, for the things that matter." Emma paused, her voice softening. "I'm really glad to hear that. You've worked so hard for everything you have. You deserve it." Maria smiled at her friend's words. Emma always had a way of making her feel grounded, reminding her of the importance of staying true to herself. "Thanks, Emma. It's a journey, for sure. But I'm getting there." Emma's tone shifted slightly, as if she were about to say something important. "I was actually calling because I have something I need to share with you." Maria's curiosity piqued. "What's going on?" Emma hesitated before speaking again, a hint of excitement in her voice. "Well, I've been working on a new project, and I think it's right up your alley. I'm starting a nonprofit that focuses on providing educational resources and mentorship to women in underserved communities. It's something I've always wanted to do, and now I finally have the chance to make it happen." Maria's heart swelled with pride as she listened to her friend. Emma had always been passionate about helping others, and hearing about her new venture was inspiring. "That sounds incredible, Emma. You've always been driven by making a difference, and this is going to have such a powerful impact." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Maria could almost hear the smile in Emma's voice as she responded. "I'm really excited about it. But here's the thing, I can't do it alone. I need help, and I'd love for you to be a part of it." Maria was taken aback for a moment. "You want me to help with the nonprofit?" Emma laughed softly. "Yes, Maria. I know you're busy with your career, but I also know how much you care about making a difference. You have the experience, the leadership skills, and the heart to make this project succeed. I'd love for you to join me and bring your vision to the table." Maria's mind raced as she processed what Emma was asking. The idea of joining a nonprofit, of dedicating her time to a cause she cared about, was both exciting and daunting. She had come so far in her career, but was she ready to shift her focus and devote energy to something that wasn't about business? As the days passed, Maria found herself thinking more and more about Emma's offer. She had always believed in the power of giving back, but she had never considered stepping away from the corporate world to fully invest in a cause. However, something about Emma's words resonated with her. Maria realized that she had the ability to make a difference not just in business, but in the world at large. Her success in the corporate world had given her a platform, but it also came with a responsibility to use that platform for good. That evening, Maria sat at her desk, reflecting on her journey. She had worked so hard to get to where she was, but she realized that her true legacy wouldn't be defined by the deals she closed or the profits she earned. It would be defined by the impact she had on others, by the lives she touched, and the changes she helped bring about. She picked up the phone and called Emma. "I've been thinking about your offer," Maria said, her voice steady. "And I'm in. I want to be part of this project. I want to help you build something that will make a real difference." Emma's excitement was palpable as she responded. "Maria, that's amazing. I knew you'd be perfect for this. Together, we're going to change so many lives." Maria smiled, a sense of fulfillment settling over her. She had spent so much of her life focused on her career, on proving herself in a world that often seemed driven by numbers and competition. But now, she was ready to take on a new challenge, one that was about more than just success. It was about purpose. She knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. She would still have her corporate responsibilities, her role at Anderson Capital, and the pressures of leading global expansions. But she also knew that, with Emma by her side, they could create something truly special, something that would have a lasting impact. The next chapter of Maria's life was unfolding, and she was ready to embrace it. She wasn't just the business leader anymore. She was someone who could bridge two worlds and make a difference in both. The journey was far from over, but Maria was no longer just chasing success. She was chasing something much bigger: fulfillment, purpose, and the chance to leave a legacy that would change lives. Maria had committed herself fully to the nonprofit project with Emma, and the transition was both exhilarating and challenging. Juggling her role at Anderson Capital with the responsibilities of the new venture proved to be more difficult than she had anticipated. The work itself was fulfilling, but the constant pull between her corporate and charitable commitments began to wear on her. She had already proven her worth in the business world, but now, she was determined to create a legacy that was more than just about profits and numbers. It was about giving back, making a real impact. Emma's vision for the nonprofit was growing, and Maria could see the potential for it to become something truly powerful. Together, they had crafted an outreach program that would provide mentorship, resources, and support for women in underserved communities. But as the project gained momentum, Maria began to realize just how much she still had to learn about the world of philanthropy. The dynamics of running a nonprofit were different from the corporate world. It wasn't about bottom lines and return on investment. It was about creating sustainable change, one person at a time. It was about relationships, deep, meaningful connections with people who had been overlooked for far too long. As they expanded the nonprofit's efforts, Maria faced new challenges. Funding was always a concern, and the logistics of managing a large-scale initiative while keeping it true to its mission was no easy task. There were moments of frustration, particularly when the corporate world's demands on her time clashed with the urgency of the nonprofit's goals. Yet, despite these obstacles, Maria felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in her previous role at Anderson Capital. She wasn't just driving business strategies, she was driving change, and it gave her a sense of fulfillment that financial success never had. One evening, after a particularly intense meeting with potential donors, Maria sat in her office, reflecting on how far they had come. The room was quiet, the city lights casting a warm glow on her desk. For the first time in a long time, Maria allowed herself to just breathe. She had built a career, but now, she was building something that mattered even more. A life that was more than just work. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was Richard, and his message was brief: "We need to talk." Maria's stomach dropped. The weight of her dual responsibilities was always present, but she hadn't expected a conversation with Richard to be on the horizon. She quickly typed back, "Of course. Is everything okay?" Richard's reply came almost immediately. "Nothing urgent. Just something I need to discuss with you." The words left Maria feeling unsettled. She had built such a strong rapport with Richard over the years, but she knew better than to ignore the gravity behind his words. When she walked into his office the next day, Richard was already seated, his expression unreadable. As she took a seat across from him, the familiar tension of a business conversation hung in the air. "Maria," Richard began, his voice steady, "I need to talk to you about your role here at Anderson Capital." Maria's mind raced, and she fought to maintain her composure. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice calm but laced with curiosity. Richard leaned forward slightly, his eyes meeting hers. "I've been keeping an eye on your performance, and while I'm incredibly impressed with what you've accomplished with the nonprofit, I'm concerned that your focus is starting to slip here. You're a critical part of this company, Maria. We need your full attention." Maria's heart skipped a beat. She had known this conversation was coming, but hearing it out loud was another matter. "I'm committed to Anderson Capital, Richard. You know that. But the nonprofit is something that's important to me. It's not just a side project." Richard nodded, his expression softening. "I know, Maria. I understand. And I respect that you're passionate about it. But you're at a crossroads. You can't do both things at the highest level. You need to decide where your focus is going to be." Maria's mind was racing. She had never been someone to shy away from hard decisions, but this one felt different. She had worked so hard to prove herself in the corporate world, and yet, the nonprofit had become a part of her in ways she hadn't expected. But Richard was right. There wasn't enough time to give both pursuits the attention they deserved. "I need to think about this," Maria said, her voice quieter now. "I understand," Richard replied, his tone sincere. "Take the time you need. But I need you to know that whatever you decide, I'll support you. This company wouldn't be where it is without your leadership, but I also know that you have the potential to make a real difference in the world. That's something you can't ignore." As Maria left Richard's office, the weight of the decision hung heavy on her shoulders. She had always believed in doing things wholeheartedly, but now she faced a choice that would shape the rest of her life. She couldn't keep juggling both paths, not without sacrificing something along the way. She needed to decide where her true calling lay. The next few days were filled with sleepless nights and endless contemplation. Maria went over every aspect of her life, the impact she had already made in business, the people she had helped through the nonprofit, and the future she wanted to build. She knew that no matter what decision she made, there would be sacrifices. But for the first time, she felt at peace with the fact that she could change direction without losing herself in the process. Eventually, Maria made her decision. It wasn't an easy one, but she had chosen to step away from Anderson Capital and devote herself fully to the nonprofit. It was time to build something bigger than herself, to create a legacy that would last. With a steady heart, she called Richard to let him know. "I've made my decision," she said, her voice clear. "I'm stepping away from Anderson Capital. It's time for me to focus on the nonprofit and the impact I want to make." Richard was silent for a moment before replying. "Maria, you've always been driven by purpose. I know you'll do great things. I'm proud of you." Maria's decision to step away from Anderson Capital was not an easy one, but it felt right. She had spent years building her career, proving herself time and again, but now, the time had come to fully embrace the cause that had ignited a new passion within her. The nonprofit she and Emma had built was growing, and with every new project, she could feel the positive impact they were making on the lives of others. It was no longer just a side project. It was becoming her life's work. The transition was challenging. There were moments when Maria questioned whether she was making the right choice, but when she saw the difference they were making in the communities they were helping, all doubts faded away. The mentorship programs were expanding, the educational resources were reaching more women than ever, and the partnerships with local organizations were growing stronger. Maria found herself traveling frequently, meeting with donors, organizing new initiatives, and speaking at events. She was busy, but this time, the busyness felt purposeful. It wasn't the constant grind of corporate life. It was the rewarding kind of work that fueled her soul. Yet, as much as she thrived in the nonprofit world, Maria still kept in touch with some of the colleagues she had worked with at Anderson Capital, and Richard was no exception. They continued to exchange messages, checking in on each other, and Maria appreciated the occasional words of encouragement he offered. He had supported her decision, even if it had been a difficult one for him to accept. One evening, Richard reached out to her with a simple message. "I know this may seem unexpected, but I think it's time for us to talk. Meet me for dinner tomorrow night." Maria was curious, wondering what it could be about. She had already made her decision, and Anderson Capital was behind her. Still, Richard had been an important part of her journey, so she agreed. The next evening, Maria arrived at a cozy restaurant in the city, the same place she and Richard had often met in the past for business dinners. She entered, and Richard was already seated at a table near the window, looking out at the city skyline. He stood up as soon as he saw her and gestured for her to sit. "I'm glad you could make it," Richard said, his tone more casual than usual. "Of course," Maria replied, taking a seat across from him. "You wanted to talk about something?" Richard smiled and took a deep breath. "I've been thinking a lot about your decision, Maria, and I wanted to say, I'm proud of you. It wasn't easy for me to see you leave, but I've always respected your courage and your conviction. You're doing great work with the nonprofit." Maria felt a rush of gratitude toward him. "Thank you, Richard. I know it was a difficult decision for both of us, but I feel like I'm finally where I'm meant to be." Richard nodded, but then his expression shifted slightly, and he leaned forward. "I've been reflecting on something else," he continued, his tone more serious now. "I know I've always been focused on the business side of things, but after seeing the work you're doing, I've realized something. I want to be part of something bigger, too." Maria raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Richard took a moment before speaking. "I want to get involved with the nonprofit. I'm not saying I want to take over or anything, but I think I can contribute. I have resources, connections, and I've learned a lot about how to grow an organization. I want to help, and I'd like to be part of something that makes a real difference." Maria was taken aback. She had never imagined Richard, a successful businessman who had always been so focused on profits, would want to invest his time and energy into a cause like hers. "That's a big step," she said carefully. Are you sure this is what you want? Richard nodded, his gaze steady. I've been so focused on climbing the corporate ladder that I forgot why I started. I see now that the real value comes from creating lasting change, helping people, and using what we have to lift others up. That's something I want to be part of. Maria took a deep breath, the weight of his words sinking in. She had always believed in the power of collaboration, of bringing people together for a common purpose. Richard's offer was unexpected, but it could be the key to taking their nonprofit to new heights. I think this could be amazing, Maria said slowly. But it's going to take time and effort, and we have to stay true to the mission. We're about empowerment, not charity. We need to make sure we're providing lasting resources, not just temporary solutions. Richard smiled. I understand, and I'm ready to put in the work. Let's make this something that lasts. Maria smiled back, feeling a sense of excitement building within her. They had always made a strong team, even back in the days when they were working on corporate deals. But now, the stakes were different. Now, they were working to make a difference in people's lives. The dinner continued with talk of plans and possibilities, and as Maria left that evening, she felt a renewed sense of hope. This was the beginning of a new chapter, one that blended her business acumen with her desire to make an impact. With Richard's support and her own drive, they could build something extraordinary. Maria had found her purpose, and now, with new allies and new opportunities, she was more determined than ever to make that purpose a reality. Months had passed since Maria and Richard decided to combine their efforts, and together they had taken the nonprofit to heights they never imagined. What started as a small idea to provide mentorship and education to women in underserved communities had blossomed into a global movement, supported by countless organizations, businesses, and individuals who believed in their vision. The partnership had worked, not just in business, but in creating meaningful change. As Maria stood in front of a group of new donors at one of their largest fundraisers yet, she couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of pride. The event was a success, but more importantly, it was the culmination of everything they had worked for, the culmination of a vision that Maria had carried with her since the moment she had stepped away from Anderson Capital. This wasn't about business deals or financial growth. This was about real people, real lives, and real change. Maria looked out at the crowd, seeing faces that had been touched by the programs she and Emma had worked tirelessly to build. Women who had received mentorship, education, and the resources to start their own businesses, to change their own lives, and to lift up their communities. And here they were, gathered to support even more. Women in need. As the evening wore on, Maria felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to see Emma standing behind her, her face lit up with a wide smile. Maria, you've done it, Emma said, her voice full of admiration. You've made this happen. We've made it happen. Maria smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. We couldn't have done it without each other. This has been one of the most incredible journeys of my life, and it's only just beginning. Emma nodded, her expression softening. You found your purpose, and now, you're giving others the chance to find theirs. Maria felt the weight of Emma's words settle in her chest. She had started this journey seeking something greater, something that would give her life meaning beyond the boardrooms and corporate deals. And now, she had found it. Not just in the success of their nonprofit, but in the connections they had made, the impact they had created, and the lives they had touched. She wasn't just leading a business anymore. She was leading a movement, and she was making a difference in a way she had never imagined possible. Later that night, as Maria stood by the window of her office, looking out at the city she had once known only as a place to climb the corporate ladder, she realized that everything had changed. She had changed. She had moved beyond the confines of ambition and success and had stepped into a role that was about building something lasting, something that transcended business and became about people, about community, about purpose. The city lights twinkled in the distance, but Maria no longer felt the pressure to be a part of that fast-paced, high-stakes world. She had carved her own path, and that path was one of meaning, one of giving back, one that aligned with her true values. As she turned away from the window and walked back into the bustling event, she was reminded of why she had made this choice, to use her success to help others, to make a real impact in the world. And she had. The future stretched out before her, full of challenges, no doubt, but also full of purpose. She had found her calling, and in doing so, she had found herself. As the night came to an end and Maria stood at the front of the room, addressing the crowd, her heart was full. She had no idea where this journey would take her next, but she knew one thing for sure. She had made the right choice. The legacy she was building was more than just a career. It was a life well lived, a life filled with meaning, and a life dedicated to making a difference in the world. And in that moment, Maria understood that true success wasn't defined by the accolades or the financial growth she had once chased. True success was about the people she had helped, the connections she had made, and the change she had created. As the applause filled the room, Maria knew that this was only the beginning. The journey she had started was one of infinite possibilities, and she was ready for whatever came next. In this emotional journey of self-discovery, Maria's life transforms as she navigates the pressures of corporate success while finding her true purpose in giving back to the community. After a breakthrough moment, she steps away from her high-powered business career to focus on a nonprofit that empowers women in underserved communities. Through touching stories of personal growth and dedication, Maria learns that true success is measured not by wealth or titles, but by the lives she impacts and the change she fosters. Her journey is a perfect example of how touching stories can inspire others to find their own path, showing that real fulfillment comes from helping others. Maria's story continues to unfold as she balances the demands of the nonprofit world with her personal growth. The touching stories of the women she helps are a reminder of how powerful it can be to give back and use one's success for something greater. As Maria's work expands, she begins to see the profound effect her efforts have had on her community and the people she serves. These touching stories remind us all that success is not just about what we achieve, but how we make others feel. Her transformation from a successful businesswoman to a passionate advocate for change is an inspiring example of the impact one person can have. The touching stories that emerge from her work offer a message of hope and perseverance, motivating others to make a difference in their own way.